I'm really excited about this. I've wanted to drive a Rover SD1 for most of my life, and today it's happening. SD stood for Specialist Division. It was the code name given to this car when it was being developed by British Leyland, and it went into production being known as the SD1, which is super cool. These cars were TV stars, they were touring cars, they were infamous police cars, and they were rally cars. Tony Pond drove one of these on the Manx Rally in 1984 and came third overall. Can you imagine a car of this size on the Manx lanes being hustled to a podium? That is just an incredible thought, and it must have been an incredible sight and sound. This has got a 3.5 litre V8, proper British muscle car. This is the Rover SD1 Vitesse, and I can't wait to show you what it's like behind the wheel. Specialist Division makes the SD1 sound like something really special. In fact, it was just British Leyland's name for Rover and Triumph. In fact, this was the last ever Rover badged car to be built in Solihull, and it was in the brand new extension to the factory there. It was largely funded by the British government after the taxpayer bailout of British Leyland in 1975. And although it looks like it was designed to be like a spaceship and have this executive feel to it, everything here is actually designed to be really modular. You've got a vent that faces the passenger, which at first you think, well, that's quirky, that's innovative. It was actually so that when they did cars for the left-hand drive market, that would serve as the entrance for the steering column. So it wasn't actually a design feature at all. It was just a way of making the cars a little bit cheaper in foreign markets. Likewise, the binnacle on top of the dashboard looks like it was designed to be there because somebody thought it would look really good. In fact, it's just really easy to move it from one side of the dashboard to the other, again, when you change from right-hand drive to left-hand drive. So you climb into this car and you see all of these design touches that look quirky, they look neat, they look really unique. It was just designed to be built as cheaply as possible in as many countries as possible. Typical British Leyland, but you know what? I'm pleased that they did that, because as a result, it does have a certain charm in here. The first V8 we saw in the SD1 was the 155 brake horsepower carburetted engine. It was effectively the engine that we'd seen in the TR8, and we first saw that in America, of course. But in 1982, this car got a makeover, cosmetically and mechanically. It got a big fat front air dam, it got bigger spoilers, it started to look more the part, and it had a better camshaft fitted, an electronic fuel injection, taking the 3.5 litre British V8 to 192 horsepower. And driving this manual version of the Vitesse here with that thumping great V8 soundtrack and that almost 200 brake horsepower, I can't help but think that while America had its muscle car era, this was Britain's. We all know the British Leyland story, and it's been told many times, normally with a heavy sigh at the end of it. But I can't help but think if there had been more moments of brilliance like this SD1 Rover Vitesse, maybe it would have been a different story after all. And someone has brought out an electric version of the SD1, retro modded of course, and it looks as good as a modern design in 2023 as it did when it first came out in 1976. There's something about that design which is timeless. Why didn't British Leyland make more cars like this and turn them into muscle cars like this one? Such a shame. Thought that while the traffic cops were thumping up and down the motorway in these SD1s, Tony Pond was thumping around the Isle of Man in one. Your average business exec was driving to the office in his or hers. And that's what makes these cars great. They were so versatile. They were designed by people who really at their heart knew what the British motorist wanted. He just didn't quite connect the dots. One man who had no problem connecting the dots in a Rover Vitesse was British rally hero Tony Pond, who, with trusty co-driver Rob Arthur alongside, adopted the go big or go home principle when it came to hustling the big Rover around the lanes. Combining the SD1 programme with the launch of British Leyland's Group B Metro 6R4, the pair took top 10s and podiums across Europe, including some famous events like the Manx, the Ulster and the Welsh Rallies. The car quickly became a fan favourite too. Turn this up, you'll soon see why. Cars of this size were just not meant to be sports cars, particularly in the 1970s, but this was a formidable touring car, and sat here in this really comfy driver's seat with a quite slick manual gearbox, that V8 soundtrack, and a far more nimble chassis than I was expecting. It does feel like a sports car, and that's quite an achievement. I knew I would like driving the SD1. I've always wanted to drive one, and driving one of these cars is about more than actually what it feels like, because you have to accept that they're old cars and they might not quite measure up to your expectations. And I didn't really come into this having too many expectations. I wanted the soundtrack, I got it. I wanted that V8 to have some grunt, it's got it. But I didn't expect it to drive quite like this. I want to keep it. I love how tactile the dashboard is in the SD1. It's like the XJS with its trip computer. It's a revelation. Buttons everywhere with little LEDs, and the screen works. It's telling me I'm doing 5.7 miles to the gallon. I just love the walnut, and I love the buttons everywhere and the electrics, which, by the way, they work. Don't believe everything you hear about British Leyland classic cars. Some would call this decadence, of course, by the 1980s, but I think it's a really nice combination of exec sports car and a little bit of British elegance. It's classy. I like it. Obviously, the undisputed star of the TV series Ashes to Ashes with DCI Gene Hunt is the UR Audi Quattro, but there is an episode that features a Rover SD1, and I've got to say, it steals the show somewhat. In total, over its production life, there were 15 different types of Rover SD1 produced, from the Rover 2000 through to this Rover Vitesse, with just over 300,000 of these fastback executive cars rolling off the production line. In very many ways, a Rover SD1 to suit everybody. Just imagine, that's all we had to drive. You can pick any car as long as it's a Rover SD1. Might fix a few of the world's problems. People would smile more. I would. Rover SD1 production ended in 1986, as did British Leyland. There were many things that BL didn't get right during its tenure, they're well documented, but David Vack's exotically designed replacement for the Rover P6 and the Triumph 2 litre and 2.5 was not one of those things. This was one heck of a blaze of glory, and it's painful in a way to think what might have been had something like that happened sooner for British Leyland.